Welcome to another Unicorn Chef. First, don't adjust your TV, your monitor, or whatever the hell you're watching this with. We have a special approach tonight. Special Ted, figured out a unique production system here where we're going to have him, we're going to have his hands, and then you're going to still be stuck with me. So it's going to be our first time doing this. I'm really excited to do this. Not only does he have a fancy knife, I'm also going to debut my fancy knife tonight. It took me 6 months to get this. This is a custom Santoku that Blenster's father made for me. So all the way down to every little component of it. He made this for himself. So if you're interested in one, reach out to Blenster on Twitter and see if you can get a knife. I love it. I've only had it for a week and I'm using it on everything. It is amazing. As always, for those of you who are cooking along or following at home, we enjoy having fun in the chat, so ask questions, and we'd love to see what you make too. So hashtag Unicorn Chef on everything you're doing. Ted, what charities are we highlighting tonight?
So I got greedy and I wanted to share two because I live here on Capitol Hill, and full disclosure, I live like right in the city. So you may hear sirens going by, you may hear my dog barking at those sirens, so please excuse me. So living in DC and having volunteered for them a number of times, I've loved to queue up DC Central Kitchen. They were started back in 1989. They do kind of a fourfold approach to community service, particularly with the folks on food. First of all, they offer culinary training to adults with high barriers to employment. So people with criminal backgrounds, sometimes learning disabilities, that kind of thing. And they basically train them up to either be line chefs, prep chefs, prep cooks, the whole nine yards, and then use those resources either to get them into the community cooking or cooking there for DC Central Kitchen. And then they use those meals to cater to fund themselves. They also do a farm to school system where they augment school lunches. And in order to keep that stuff supplied, they also do what they call like a food waste recovery program. So somewhere around 3,000 pounds, I think it's per year, gathered from grocery stores, restaurants, etc., stuff that normally be thrown away. They repurpose that into their food supply. Additionally, they do something called Healthy Corners, which they're using to provide foods to corner stores, which we have all over DC, and are conveniently located in food deserts. So they just say, hey, if you give me a healthy food corner over here, I'll keep it stocked. So fruits, vegetables, so I think some small prepped meals. And then finally, they use all of that to supply their homeless food preparation system to go out and feed shelters or individual homeless they see on the street. So that's one. If you don't happen to be DC and you want to contribute to something else, there's also the World Central Kitchen, which is another DC-focused DC resident, Jose Andreas's effort. I don't think I need to explain what he's done for the country and for the world, but that's the other one I'd like to queue up for you.
Jose was down in Texas with helping to deliver meals, right?
He was. Yep, he was. And then he dropped all that to come up here and help feed some of the National Guard troops.
All right. First question, Ted. What are you drinking?
Tonight I am drinking a Chardonnay just because I want to be able to get through the entire meal. But if this were a weekend, we'd probably be drinking something 12 years old and brown.
I am a fan of Scotch, as I think a lot of people know. I am drinking a Virginia white table wine called Duquigny, and it is actually really good. I don't mean to sound mean about that. I had lower expectations when I saw Virginia table wine.
Oyster Bay. Yeah, I like Oyster Bay.
All right.
Conveniently enough, that's what we'll be cooking with tonight as well.
Okay, Unicorn Chef, take us away. What are we making?
So I was given a couple of rules by you that I take issue with, but we'll address those at another time. The first rule I actually appreciate, which is using ingredients that people can find anywhere. I think the barrier to a lot of people is, they see these shows and it's like complex stuff and like, where the hell am I going to find X? So with that in mind, and with spring on the horizon, I thought I would do kind of a spring vegetable medley stuff that you can find at your farmer's market, or if you have a good food reclaim system in a food desert, you can find those there as well. So we're going to do a vegetable medley glazed in chicken stock with pan-seared chicken breasts, and then a kind of a reduced mushroom glaze. I've also added quinoa on the backside, but in order to keep this keto friendly for the people who like to keep keto, and the way you know they like to keep keto is they tell you, you can omit the quinoa if you so choose.
All right, let's get going.
All right, cool. So for the vegetable medley, what I want to do is have 2 root vegetables, which you can find, year round, not a big deal. And then sprinkle in with those some spring vegetables, particularly asparagus and the sugar snap peas. So the first thing you want to do is get your pot of water boiling. So we'll kick that on. I obviously got ahead here because I don't want us to run out of time. You're going to get this to a nice boil to get your root vegetables in. But before we do that, we're going to cut them up. What I use to supply my vegetables is Imperfect Foods. It's a delivery service that repurposes a bunch of produce that just isn't pretty enough for the shelves. So as an example, this is a carrot that you get from Imperfect Foods. It's broken, right? It's not very attractive, but it doesn't matter. You're cutting it up. It's a good service because it also gives you full vegetables as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. The problem with root vegetables like this is it takes them a while to cook all the way through in time. And the way you can overcome that, of course, is to go in little slices, reduce the mass. What I like to do is kind of cut them on a bias like this, and then rotate, cut again, rotate, cut again. And then you just keep doing this down the carrot. And what it does, it gives you these fun little shards, which are both thin, but they're, kind of a unique shape. For those of you with kids, I think that keeps them interested. Sorry, you also want to peel these, but I peeled it ahead of time. So
I like that cutting technique. That's interesting.
You like that? I'm sure there's a French word for it. And full disclosure, I learned this from watching Kenji Lopez Alt, who is famously of the Food Lab and Serious Eats. He showed that to me. So once you chop those up, of course, we're going to grab your potatoes. Very simple, 2 cuts. You don't want to go much smaller than this because then they get mushy, right? So we'll just quarter them like this. And then once you have them all chopped up, what I'll do is I'll actually throw the carrots in early because they're more fibrous plant. So they take a little bit longer to cook. So we'll throw those in our boiling water. And a note for people who are kind of new to cooking or find it too intimidating, there's really only like 3 or 4 key things that I think you need to be a successful chef. That is a good knife. I'm rocking the Shun. I have all the Shuns, and they sharpen and keep up well over time, which is a key complaint that a lot of people have with cheap knives. Beautiful knives, well weighted. A set of these bowls are just absolutely invaluable. They stack easily, and they don't take up very much space. Of course, a cast iron. I know a lot of people are in apartments and everything, and those aren't things they want to take up space. So instead of those, a nice steel pan. These are naturally non-stick, as long as you maintain them, season them well. Do you agree or disagree with that? I think Bryson is frozen. Oh no, we lost Bryson. Okay, I'm running the show. So Bryson agrees with everything I say. So we want to get the carrots in early. They take a little bit longer to get cooked through. The way you can tell if they're cooked through is you just scoop them up with a slotted spoon and take a toothpick or a fork, stab them in there, and if they go through softly, then you're fine. And then after the carrots have been in there a little bit, we'll go ahead and throw the potatoes in. Be careful of splashing yourself with hot water. Let me make sure that I'm not the one who dropped out. Let's see here.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that.
You're back. Okay, it was you, not me.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay, perfect. So I was just telling the audience, since I had to run the show on my own, that you want to get the carrots in earlier. They take a little bit longer to cook through, but you can tell, simple test, just stab them with a fork or a toothpick. If they go through easily, they're done. While we're doing this, I'm going to prepare the chicken stock. Now, a word on chicken stock. I am an absolute fan, regardless of which animal we're dealing with. I am an absolute fan of better than bouillon. Put that under there. So it's better than bouillon. It is incredibly good, dense. So a little bit goes a long way. Oh, look at that, like mine. So I also like the bouillon cubes. They're great. They take up a little space. I do not hate the cartons of bouillon, but they take up space, and it forces you to use it all up at once, right? Or throw it away. I have some carton bouillon here. That's just because my neighbor had some surplus and she needed to offload it. Now, a note on this, you want to use low sodium because you want to control your sodium into your meal by taste, and you can't do that with things that aren't low sodium. Another note on stock is that anything that isn't made at home is going to lack kind of that, true home stock thickness and flavor, and that's because of the cartilage that comes from, or the what do you call it, gelatin that comes out of the cartilage and bones, but they just can't get it in there. So what I like to do is...
This is what we're using the gelatin for. I was trying to figure that out beforehand.
Trying to sleuth me out?
Well, yeah. All right. So there's a Ukrainian dish where it's a jellied chicken. And I'm sitting there because, of course, you just posted the ingredients and I didn't have a recipe. So I'm like, are we doing like a gelatin? No, because that would have to chill. We don't have time for that during the episode. So I couldn't figure out what the gelatin was for. This is a really neat, kitchen hack. Right. Gelatin in the chicken stock to get a thicker, that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. So it really gives it kind of that mouthfeel. And just I like to do this in my my chicken soups as well, because who's got the time to actually do a full chicken from chicken whole to chicken soup? So this kind of makes up for that. So we'll I like to warm the stock up a little bit in the microwave, help it bloom, but we're just going to get this in there so it blooms, and we're going to set that aside. It takes a little bit of time for it to soak up the water. Let's check in on our vegetables real quick. Yep, they're about halfway there. You can get these vegetables done in about 10 to 12 minutes. And so while we're waiting for those, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our green vegetables. And you can choose to do this or not. I just do this because it cooks a little bit quicker, and some people don't like the woody nature of asparagus. So you can shave the lower parts of the stock. That'll get kind of the woodier fibers out. Another part that people don't like about asparagus is that woody stalk, and that's just because it's been cut at the wrong place. You can find it where it breaks off. That's a good indication that you don't have all the wood in there. Another really good way to check this out is to just bite it. Give it a few chews, because it can't be misleading. And if you found that the piece you just cut off was chewable and enjoyable, you're in the good territory. So what we're going to do once that's shaved off, and again, you don't have to do this. By not doing this, you just leave more fiber on the vegetable, and fiber is good. We're going to cut it on an oblique here, and you'll notice that everything tonight we're going to do this. Okay, so we got some lovely little oblique asparagus there. And you're going to do that to all your asparagus. I'm going to say a cup, depending on how many people you're cooking for. And then we're going to get your sugar snap peas out. Now these I've pre-peeled, but they all have strings. And what you do to get rid of the string is pull this off, and then a string will come off at the end of it. This may be the biggest thing that makes this meal not quick, especially for those of you with a family. This could be something that you could do with your family on a weekend, during meal prep or what have you. But once that's done, this is really quick. We're going to cut this on an oblique as well. You don't have to do this. You can snap them as well. This is very easy to do while listening to a podcast. You do it with kids. Snapping them is fun for the kids. I don't have any kids. I don't know. I just was a kid, and that sounds fun to me. So
This is the Tom Sawyer approach to painting the fence: is you have to make them think it's fun.
yeah, trick them into
Social
it. Right?
engineering your family to get them to make your snap peas.
Now, while we're waiting for the root vegetables to cook, what I want to do is grab one of those always handy dandy bowls. So I'm going to grab my larger bowl here, and we're going to fill it with ice. Because we're going to do a little something called blanching. So all blanching is really is a way to boil vegetables without boiling them all the way through. Too many times you've seen vegetables that are just boiled into complete lack of nutrition and just not really enjoyable. It's just a fibrous mush in your mouth, and that's what we want to avoid. So by dipping them in boiling water really quickly, let's say like 3 minutes, and then getting into the ice as quickly as possible, retains the integrity of the cells and makes it still, chewy and enjoy, or crushier and enjoyable. And as billions of dollars in the snack food world have proven, mouthfeel is important. Okay, just what I'm doing here is I'm pulling out my root vegetables, just sticking a fork in them, and you can see those potatoes are done. Let's take a look at the carrots.
Oh, wait, were we supposed to put the potatoes in?
Oh, did I? Yeah, that was when you were cut off. Sorry.
All right, yeah. I'm adding my potatoes now.
Yeah, you want to get those root vegetables in. It'll only take about 10 minutes. And while we're doing that, I'll show you another one of my favorite investments. So I'm not a fan of like single-use kitchen appliances or devices. So I found this collapsible, so it saves space living here in DC, strainers, which work for hot and cold foods alike. I'm going to show it to you here in a second. I just washed my mushrooms. That's a step you should be aware of. You want to wash your mushrooms. They grow in dirt, and they aren't very thoroughly cleaned when they're packaged. So make sure you get those rinsed off.
All right, hold on. Let's slow down. We're going to slow down. I'm going to call a timeout here. I'm going to throw the yellow flag because you are going fast. You have the land speed kitchen record for speed through this. Okay, so we're going to take a moment. Bryson's behind because he had to reconnect. Now starting his potatoes. So our potatoes and our carrots are cooking, right? They're boiling. We've got our shaved asparagus all nice and going. We've washed our mushrooms, or we're washing our mushrooms. So while we're kind of letting all of that just sort of hold and catch its breath, why don't you tell us about you, Ted?
Fair enough.
What mistakes in life brought you to this show tonight?
Well, I think the first mistake was being friends with Mick, who I think connected us. We've worked tangentially across from each other, I'm sure, our entire careers. But what led me to kind of being a foodie, I think, was being in Iraq and Afghanistan for a good, half decade, eating some of the worst food in my life for extended periods of time, and being left with not a whole lot of forms of entertainment. Interestingly, one of the things that made it onto TV in war zones is Alton Brown. So I think I saw him on AFES, obviously, AFN, and then just started watching him like for hours on end as we have downtime, and found that he did this weird combination of science, comedy, and cooking that was just made it really available to me. Not only that, but it like made me slavishly desire the food that he was making. So I just came back and I started watching a butt ton of Alton Brown, which spilled over into a lot of other interesting people who were in the food world, led me down the trail of like Kenji, as I said, and just doing it on my own. Interestingly, when I was in Afghanistan, we had native chefs in some of the interesting places that we went for times, and they made amazing food. So, here we were led to believe that the only food available to us was like garbage chow hall food or MREs, more frequently for the line of work I was in. and that this was a third world country and the food was going to be, garbage, but it wasn't. It was mind blowing. Which, once you start learning about food and culture a little bit more, that's unsurprising. You've got hundreds, if not thousands, of years of the same people making the same foods to a perfection. So it kind of taught me a lot about food and culture, and then I kind of brought it into my own home.
Wow.
And here we are. How about you? How'd you get into it?
So OBC. I graduated from West Point. I was at OBC, and I realized I didn't know anything about the kitchen. This was, sort of at the dawn of the internet, so it wasn't like you could just go and look up recipes. And I was like, well, like my options are I can go to Applebee's, outside the post every night. I can go to the DFAC, or I can try to actually learn how to make food. So I decided to try to learn how to make food, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Like I said, there was nothing I could kind of look up, and it wasn't like I could just go get the joy of cooking or something. So I just sort of thought of recipes in my head and then tried to make them. And there are probably some Frankenstein meals that I made back in the 90s that are still stalking this planet to this day. They were so bad when they came to life. But at some point after a couple of years, I actually started to get pretty good at it. And it's just been, here I am, 2 decades later. And turns out I sort of know what I'm doing. I was bemoaning on the chat that when you commented on Alton Brown, who I adore because I love how he breaks down a lot of what the science of what's happening. As much as I enjoy the cooking part where I don't have to measure anything, it's just by feel. It's nice to know how to get certain things to do certain things. And so you were commenting on the science, the comedy, and the cooking. And I was joking in the channel that I wish we had one of those three.
My connection's going bad. I got to. Bye. You're absolutely right. And honestly, the bar to entry to cooking was such that I ignored it for so long. I just thought it was something that I didn't get to do, and I kind of resolved myself to that. And it took a war zone to get me to sit down and kind of think about it and consume it. And honestly, it's not baking. It's fun. Yeah. It's easy. It's forgiving. Because it's pandemic, I got into baking, and baking is none of those things.
Yeah, no, I'm not a baker. So the original mission for why I started this show, besides just I got to cook and I can't go anywhere, is one, let's make the kitchen more accessible to folks, which goes back to let's have ingredients that people can get. And if there are things that they can't get, then have substitutes, so that folks in our community can have an easier time without being intimidated with coming in the kitchen. And then the second part, which is where we highlight the charities, which is let's just try to do something good in the world at the same time.
I agree. Once you start getting into this, you start to see the things that made you hate it. Once you remove those barriers, it makes it so much more accessible. And an example of that is a good knife. Like a good knife completely changed my desire to cook. You start looking forward to cutting things.
If you have a hammer, everything's a nail. If you have a knife, everything should be cooked.
Right. I wonder if I can cut that smaller. Another thing that I did is I watched people how to dice an onion properly, and it was a game changer. Like a complete game changer. So
you know the trick where you cross hatch it and then you just I remember when I learned that years ago. It's just, oh my God, that's so much easier.
Prior to that moment, I probably lost 50% of my onion mass just because I was butchering it, and I had a bad knife, so I was smashing through it. So those of you following along, you should probably have your root vegetables off. Bryson, you're probably a couple of minutes away from that.
I am still a few minutes away. I've already got where my potatoes are what's slowing me down.
It's very important to keep these from getting too a mashed potato quality, because then they start falling apart in your dish, and then you just got bits of potato. You want these things to hold up under what we're going to do to them later, which is to glaze them in the chicken stock.
All right. Well, I'm ready to move on. I think I can stay about on pace at this point.
Okay. I'll see if I can slow myself down a bit. I used to brief flag officers, and that was both my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. And I
What was
constantly
your
got
favorite
feedback.
color, Ken?
Excellent pace. My favorite color?
Well, no, for the flag officers, like they have color preferences.
I'm not tracking, man.
You've never had a flag officer tell you that they want their PowerPoint in a particular color?
Oh no, I've been told by their staff. There's always some hinge or some JO who was there hanging over my shoulder, making sure that we were within the right color and format palette. Of course, that stuff was decided well before I ever showed up, and I didn't know why it was so important.
Have you seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada?
Of course.
Okay, so Meryl Streep, where she goes on this whole like rant about cerulean and how cerulean was chosen by this designer, and then like it made its way, several years later into the mainstream. She was wrong. Cerulean was actually developed by a 3-star general the year prior in a PowerPoint, and then that's what inspired the designer that led to all of that. That's where that shit starts.
The military leads the way in everything social, and it turns out fashion as well. One of the biggest stories kind of like that, we had a change of command with a new flag officer coming in, and I did notice somebody was very nitpicky about changing our square corners to rounded corners in the slides for the thought maps and shit. And it got me wondering, like, where is this coming from? And it's probably from that. All right, so we've got our root vegetables in the strainer, and this is the thing that I wanted to show you guys. So this is a hot and cold strainer. It is plastic silicone. It's got these arms that you can collapse for storage, and also if you have a different sized sink, but it also collapses. And so I only have one strainer as opposed to multiple strainers that some people may have. And of course, it fits in various size sinks, which I really like. Throw me off my pace. What are we doing next? Oh, so what you're going to want to do is fill that pot back up with some water. You don't have to go as full as you did with the root vegetables, because we're only going to do our green vegetables. And pick that bad boy up.
Yeah, so when I think about blanching like this, I actually think about the same way that you make Wurst, where you just want it sort of like almost like half level to the Wurst. It works the same thing with the asparagus.
Yeah, and it cooks faster too.
Yep.
What was I going to say here? Oh, so we can start talking about the chicken, since the blanching doesn't really need active participation on our part. So right about now is a good time to get your chicken breast out. Kick that pan up to about to medium. We're doing a long cook. Now, the original, I guess, French recipe that I followed for this calls for skin on chicken. I don't typically do skin on chicken just because I've, gained the COVID-20, and I thought we wanted this to be kind of a healthier version. The benefit of having the skin on chicken is it adds a little bit more fat, and it adds a little bit more what we call fond to the bottom of the pan. That's just a French gatekeeping word that just says stuff. And that's stuff that we're going to deglaze.
I was wondering why we were doing chicken breast, because I would have done this with chicken thighs, done the thighs down, rendered the fat out of them, and then worked with it. So now 100%. There we go.
Yeah. So I'm modifying the fat content with butter, and you can also add healthier fats with olive oil. Bob's your uncle on this one. The chicken is a forgiving meat if you know how to handle it. In this case, what I've done, and this violates one of Bryson's rules, I've sous vide'd my chicken. And that's because I think, the sous vide has become ubiquitous. It's everywhere in cooking shows and cookbooks. You can get one for like $75. I've got the Nova over here. It's just cooking away, and you can dual use this for storage if you don't use it very often. I keep my chicken at 140 on this. There are varying degrees that you can sous vide chickens for consistency. So if you take it up to 160, you're going to have a very firm chicken for like chicken salads and things like that, but it'll still be moist. 150 is your typical take it out of the sous vide and put it on a plate. You should never do that way, because then you have yourself a very moist, wet chicken. You should always pan sear anything that comes out of sous vide. Luckily, that's what this recipe calls for. So I've taken it down to 140, which is about 10 degrees off where I want to be, because I'm going to pan sear it. And I'm also going to do a pour over with the sauces that we're going to create in here. And that pour over adds more heat onto the flesh. And then we have another at least 10 to 15 degrees of carryover. And this will be true for any meat that you cook. Once you take the meat out of the pan, it will continue to cook for a little bit. For this dish, we are going to do olive oil in the pan and butter. If you're not comfortable with butter, I like coconut oil. Coconut oil adds an interesting flavor to things because we're not working with a whole lot of complex flavors in this. It won't combat those flavors. So,
first point is, of course, thank you for putting it in the instructions that people could sous vide in advance. That's why everybody's already done that. Zing. Second is, you didn't read the instructions. It was in the speaker notes. Yeah, you could tell prior service. Yeah, I didn't read those. I'm just going to show up. I'll adjust as we go, except for, the unit can't just adjust the same way around you. Second, we've actually had one sous vide on the show. That was Chris and Darcy Villasenor, who we did a sous vide steak, and we talked about an alternative way of doing that, of how you can do that in a general water bath, where you're keeping it just below a boil. And with a thermometer, and you can get the same results with a Ziploc bag as opposed to getting a fancy actual sous vide thermometer device.
So I don't have any experience with that. The one concern I might have is any burning of the medium that you're putting the protein in. But if it works, then I guess the concern is not there. So I always recommend unsalted everything, to include butter. With butter, you can modify the flavor to your liking. With salted butter, you can't do that. This is also true in baking, but we are elitists here, and we don't talk well of bakers. So my second pot of water is boiling. Is yours?
Yeah, I'm boiling. Sorry, I was washing my hands. I had to turn my microphone off. I'm boiling. I'm good. Ready to blanch.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're blanching together.
Oh, that's a first. I've never done that before.
Blanching together?
Yeah, it just sounds something.
You've not lived, my friend.
You know what? I've been in a foxhole before. I know what happens.
All right. So with the chicken, first we'll go ahead and take this out. So another drawback to the sous vide chicken breasts is they just don't look appealing when you take them out. Also, with the sous vide chicken breasts, you'll put your seasoning on before you put them into the vat. So as you can see, I've got perfectly cooked chicken breasts there. They're lovely. I can keep them right now perfectly. They just don't look very good, in my opinion. And that's why I think you should sear absolutely everything that comes out of sous vide. Luckily,
nothing looks good coming out of a sous vide. I mean, if you put beef in there, it's going to come out like grayish, and I mean, it's perfectly cooked, but it's that presentation. Again, going back to the mouthfeel comment earlier, I mean, you need to do a little bit more. You have everything exactly the way you want it. You just have to do that finishing touch out of the sous vide.
Yep, it definitely changes the mouthfeel. It helps seal things in. I've had somebody ask me if you should sear it first, which kind of made me laugh. The other benefit of the sous vide is I can keep this in the sous vide for hours. It's almost impossible to overcook a protein at the proper temperature in a sous vide. By the way,
that's not true. That's not true.
I have a caveat, but our blanched vegetables are about ready to come out. Okay, so what I'm doing here, here's my sous vide, my blanched vegetables. I've got myself a little strainer, so I'll just pour them straight into the strainer. Since my sexy strainer that I talked about so much is full of my root vegetables. And then straight into the ice bath. And you can just leave those in there. There's no harm, no foul in them getting in there. And what we're going to do is reheat them with the glazing in a second. So the caveat to the sous vide is, yes, you can cook these things for up to 24 hours, and that's too much. What was your caveat, or what is your not true?
No, so there is a time limit when the proteins break down too much. So like with steak, after 4 hours, for example, with like a traditional like mignon, is it yes, it's cooked down. Yes, it's not overdone, but it's going to be like mushy.
Yep. Yep.
And there's again, nothing you can do to fix that. You've cooked it down so much to that point.
It's done, right? And there is like again important caveats there. The temperature that you do it at. You can get away with 6 to 8 hours sous vide at a lower temperature, but you just don't want to. Like, what's the point? If you do have like a dinner party, however, the strength here is that you can sous vide them to the appropriate temperature, take them down to a nice warm temperature where it doesn't congeal, it doesn't like solidify. And you can, the other good thing, especially for those with families, is that you can do like 10 breasts for meal prep. I've put at least 10 breasts into this thing, and that's, I think, an 8-inch by 8-inch or 10-inch by 10-inch. So for the proteins, we're going to take off, let's say, 3 tablespoons of butter. That's a bit more than 3 tablespoons there. We'll throw that in the pan. Nope, made that one a little hotter than I should have. So what I've done here, Bryson, is I burned my butter. And the only way to get away from that is to get rid of it.
That would have been helpful advice about a month ago when we had smoke alarms on a couple of guest episodes. I think one of them is on the chat.
What were you guys making?
I don't know. I wasn't cooking. Hell if I remember what they made. It was like instant rice and like they threw some food on it. I don't know. This show has been going on for almost a year now, and we've experimented with a lot of things, including handing the reins over to people who don't know how to cook. So,
oh, those must be entertaining.
It's hard to say what happens. You can go watch them. They're very funny. They have the comedy element. The cooking part, well, you know.
All right. So make sure that when you set it to medium, you actually set it to medium and not medium high like I did. We'll let that pan cool off a bit. One of the great things about these steel pans is they convect and hold heat very well. Unfortunately, one of the bad things about these pans is if you set it too high, you got to wait a second for it to come down a bit.
Are you working with an electric oven? Yeah, you are.
I am. Don't judge me.
Oh man, I've had to do that twice in my life. I am not a fan.
Yeah, neither am I. I've worked at a cooking school in DC called Culinary, and it was my first real experience outside of home ec working on an actual gas range, and it's such a game changer. So much so that I had considered getting one of those portable propane burners. Mm-hmm. Because they make life so much easier, and it's like the temperatures are true. It heats up quickly. You could do fun stuff like flambe.
Well, for me, it's just going back to like why I like cooking versus baking is when there's fire, I can feel it. Like I can feel how it's cooking. I can't do that with electric. You just don't get that same feel.
Yeah, it's a reactive heater as well. So if it feels itself getting too hot, it comes down. You have like variance in the temperature. So before we get this, before we get the fats in the pan, I should have said this first. Let's get the aromatics. So some people will strip the aromatics or chop them up. The beauty of this dish is you don't need to do that. You just throw them straight into your fat, and it'll permeate the fat, which is why we're doing the spoon over method. But additionally, it makes it easier to remove because we're going to use the pan again shortly thereafter to make the mushroom glaze. So I'm doing, say, a little small handful of thyme there, rosemary as well. These aromatics are very forgiving. You can't really overpower too much with them, and they're perfect for blending protein. So let's try this again. I'm going to put in the fat. And then with your pre-sous vide chickens, because everybody is smart and a mind reader and knew that I was going to do this, you just drop them in. Now the thing about putting proteins and fats is you don't want to like throw them in and worry about splashing your fingers. Just lay it down. Sizzling fats know when you're afraid of them, and they will burn you. And we'll do is we're just moving around a little bit here. What we want to do is get that sear on the side, but we also want to throw in our aromatics now and let them permeate those fats. And I'll actually throw in a little bit more butter and a little olive oil just to increase the volume, because we want to have something to pour, right? Oh man, the house smells amazing right now.
Yeah, I love that smell when the aromatics comes up.
Oh, this is so good. And if you want, you can throw some shallots in here for some flavor complexity. I just didn't, because I didn't put it in my instruction steel, and I wanted to respect that.
Could we chop an onion real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. We can chop a shallot.
I don't have any shallots, so I will chop an onion.
I mean, the meal is only made better by onion.
Onion, garlic, and oil. Fat is the holy trinity.
100%. I don't. I was following kind of the original recipe on this, which didn't call for any of those, just because I didn't want to deal with any variables that I wasn't aware of. But I've never had an onion or garlic make a meal bad, except for ice cream, maybe.
I'm sure somewhere in Japan there's a garlic ice cream.
Sure. So with these kind of onion family of vegetables, a lot of people fight the skin. Don't fight the skin. Just take off this outer layer. You don't need it. It's not important. You're not losing that much volume on the onion, and you don't have to deal with the skin. Boom, that easy. And then for this meal, because we're pulling the aromatics out, you can just chop it roughly. You can throw those in right there like that. Go ahead and put that chicken. We don't want to cook this through, but what we do want is that beautiful color. The color right there is what we're looking for.
I'm going to show off my color.
And at this point, because it's cooked, we're not really focusing on the cooking of it. That is a beautiful color. And I'm going to put in just a little bit more olive oil because I screwed around talking to you. And also, we're missing the fat from the actual cooking of the chicken. Now, those of you cooking at home, take your time on this. You want to get it right. 140 is your target on this. Okay, so what we're doing is we're tipping it up here. Get my camera right. I'll tell you, the drying rack is not a good place for this camera. So we're tipping it up like this, and we're just spooning it over the chicken. And this is particularly important for you cooking from raw. It helps cook it more, but it also helps the flavor permeate the breast.
So I think that technique, the spooning technique, I think is called vignette.
Vignette?
No, vignette with a B.
Ah.
I think that's what it's called. It's been a little while.
Look at these bougie, educated people coming in on kitchen. And so that spooning is, for my opinion, done for me. For those of you who are cooking from raw, keep going. One of the other things that we should have started with. This is a great investment. It is a digital thermometer with a magnet on the back, so it sits on my hood, and you can just throw that right into your chicken. And of course, I'm going to be good because I was sous videing it. But your target is 140. Because that carryover is absolutely merciless. I mean, it's unavoidable. You'll have carryover no matter what you're doing. Get a little color on that one. And put it right there on the cutting board to rest, because that's where we're going to cut it. Okay, so we'll take these aromatics. I'll go ahead and pause for a little bit because I know everybody else is behind this sous vide. But once you get to that point, you just throw away your aromatics. Alternatively, you can take the aromatics and put them into another pan, add the rest of your aromatics, put an oil in there, let it cook up a little bit, maybe with some garlic, and then you can have an oil infusion, and then just push it through that strainer that you used on your vegetables, your blanched vegetables. A nice infused oil is worth its weight in gold. Now, whatever you do, don't get rid of all the juice that's in the bottom and that stuck on stuff. We're reducing that shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to get that second pan out. I'm going to put that thing on medium as well. So have you taken any actual classes or training, Bryson?
Nope. I've never taken a cooking class ever. Just been a personal student of it. Seen different things that I find interesting. This show has taught me a few different techniques. For example, like you just taught me a different way to cut root vegetables. I'm going to start using that. I think that's fantastic. So just keep experimenting and put myself out there.
It wasn't all for naught, and even though I screwed up the instructions, we're redeemed a bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get our mushrooms in here. Mushrooms are interesting to cook because you'll reduce them by half with their volume. That's just because of how much moisture they have and how cellulose they are. I put in the mushroom type that I put in there just because they have a lot of pores for flavor and stuff like that. As you're seeing here, we're dealing with a very saucy recipe. You don't have to have those. They don't bring anything entirely unique to the flavor dynamic that's required for this. I just like the Morels just because they're funny to look at. They have crevices for flavor, and you can get them at a lot of the markets here in DC. I'm using Baby Bellas. And we're going to kind of do these things at the same time. We want to glaze the vegetables, so go ahead and strain your greens. And this is the interesting, more difficult part of blanching. You got to pick the ice cubes out of the vegetables or the vegetables out of the ice cubes.
I just strained it.
Did you melt all your ice cubes?
Yeah.
Didn't have enough ice cubes.
Fair enough.
And you definitely don't want to get an ice cube into a hot pan of grease. That is a very teachable moment right there. It's kind of like those stories of people deep frying frozen turkeys. If you haven't done a frozen turkey episode, sign me up.
We have not done a frozen turkey episode. We haven't done anything that big because that's more of like set it and then come back, hours later.
It's the prep that's the most important part of that that video. Okay, so with the chicken stock, we're going to go half and half. Go ahead and get your vegetable pan warm, about medium. We're not going to use it yet. And then with your pan with your font in it, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more butter. As you can tell, this is a French dish. And you're going to add your mushrooms. And you can, depending on your cooking style, you can toss them, you can stir them. Just, keep them moving around. You want to get that font off the bottom. So if you've got, some chicken stuck on the bottom, pick that up. That's just adding good stuff. And then once they're kind of warmed up and spread out and covered in fat, you're good to go. Leave that for a second. And we don't want to turn these like full reduced into like little slivers of mush. So we're going to keep an eye on them. Once we start to see them wilt a bit, that's when we're going to hit them. I'm trying to touch this a little bit. That's when we're going to hit them with the wine. And if you're not already at medium, you want to get there because you want this to cook the wine off and add the flavor into the mushrooms. And you don't want them to sit there and just kind of stew, right? I didn't notice that there was a chat until just now. This is going to be distracting.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I got it. It's mostly just shenanigans.
Yeah, that's why I'd be distracted.
It's rated R.
I'm just wondering how many of my friends are in there and what they're saying.
I don't think any of these people are friends with you.
Well, that's rude.
If you're a friend with Ted, say something on the channel.
I've got friends.
Did you invite him? Did you give him heads up notice?
I mean, Twitter.
Okay.
I did post it in our super secret cyber chat.
Because you didn't post your recipe to me until like 2 days ago, so I wasn't able to really promote this.
It was yesterday, in fact.
All right, never mind.
Okay.
I had less than 24 hours.
So as you see, your fat kind of started to boil off and reduce a little bit. Hit it with that wine. I'd say only a half a cup, maybe. Yeah. Eyeball it. At the same time, get your vegetable pan up to medium. It should be there right now. Go ahead and throw those vegetables in there. Get them as dry as possible. So shake them in that strainer. You could really smell that wine coming off the vegetables right now, or the chicken, the mushrooms right now. You just check. And it comes off the wine. And then we're going to pour roughly half the stock in the vegetables.
All right, which vegetables did we put in?
We put in all of the vegetables.
All the vegetables going in. All right.
All of the vegetables go in one pan. And then we'll let this wine cook off a little. If you're not seeing enough of that wine cook off, then go ahead and kick it up a notch. Those with gas burners will have this happen a lot easier, a lot more visibly. The rest of us plebs are stuck eyeballing it. And because we're reducing the chicken stock on the vegetables, you want to turn that up a little bit because we've increased the volume, and it makes it a little bit harder to cook off. But we're turning it into a glaze on there. And then we'll throw in a little bit of that chicken stock, and we'll really dial up that temperature on that main burner. Because now we're in the reducing territory, and we want to reduce it before we stew these tomatoes. Or potatoes, and really mushrooms. You still want them to have some vivant, some life in there, some vigor.
Hear that, Mike? Put some vivant in your mushroom.
And the key to like mastering this stuff, the people who have mastered their dishes don't get it on the first time. So if it sucks, don't get discouraged. You know, nobody made their perfect meal the first time.
Reminds me of the first time I ever made ramen from scratch. So my daughter spent several years of her childhood living in Japan, and it took me 3 days to make the ramen because I soaked my kombu, I rendered my stock, I put it all together, I did everything, and I was like, hey, what do you think? And she's like, it's okay. And I was like, okay, this is fantastic. She's like, Dad, I've had ramen from families that have been practicing this for 800 years. This is your first time. It's okay. You should be proud of that. I was like, all right, that's fair.
Everybody's a critic. I switched my my pan here so you can get a look at my vegetables. Nice and colorful, very springtime. I also did ramen. So one of the things that I do here in the city is I volunteer to feed the homeless, and I specifically do that at a place called Toki Underground, which is a
I know
ramen shop in
Toki.
DC.
I've been to Toki.
Yeah, right. Good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Head chef, 100% Irish.
That's funny, but I love their ramen. It's good ramen.
Yeah, he actually went over there to learn how to make it. Okay, so with the little teaching moment here, with the mushrooms, what you're looking for is like back of the spoon level of thickness. You can also do that by pulling it away, and if it doesn't run back in, that's where you want it. So I'm gonna take mine off the heat. If you're not there, keep cooking. But you basically tip the pan back and draw a. Let's put it on camera. You just drag your thing through there, and if it just stays, if like these walls build and the liquid doesn't run back over, you've gotten the thickness that you want. So yeah, I linked up with him on the. I think one of his ex-girlfriends or something was a friend of mine, and she knew that I'd like to help out where possible. But helping out on the holidays in DC that you haven't planned like 16 months ahead of time is impossible. It's such, the holidays volunteering here in DC is so hard to get into. If you don't have a place already picked out, then forget about it. And you know, in our business, you can't really commit to anything like that far ahead of time, as you know. So she hit me up, and I went over and was surprised to see a fellow rugby-loving Irishman running the joint, and that was like 4 years ago. And ever since then, we watch rugby together and cook for Thanksgiving and Christmas together.
That's really cool.
What was the point of me telling that story? Oh, so that's I got into ramen with him, and I'm like, all right, well, we're doing COVID. I already tried the baking thing. Let's do the ramen thing. And so I did the 2-day cooking of bones, and followed all of his directions and everything. And that's when I learned that ramen broth is a flavorless thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, no, the broth itself, there's a lot of like complexity, but not like that like huge amount of flavor, and it's everything else you do afterward. And you have to blanch the bones beforehand. You don't have to, but doing that gives it a clearer broth. Yeah.
And so it was a whole, like the level of effort put in for the amount that I got out, and B, like you have a bunch of stuff that you're not immediately going to eat. It was fun to experience, but I might not do it again just for me.
So I have an approach that I've mastered that does not, it takes a long, like it takes several days to plan, but the actual effort is not that, it's not that much.
You don't reduce your own bones?
I do. No, I do. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier when I realized that you had required gelatin in this, because I've never used gelatin in a dish like this. This is why I was saying earlier, I was trying to figure out what you were doing. So how I get that is I'll use pig's feet, and I render the collagen out of the pig's feet in my ramen broth to get that like thick, creamy broth.
You still have to like shepherd it for a day and pull all that stuff off the top though, right?
That's not that much effort. Like the scum comes to the top, you spoon it off, it goes, spoon it off. Like once it gets going, there's not a lot to it.
Yeah, it's just they're not leaving the house or coming back at regular intervals.
Yeah, but it is not a lot of like active effort. I mean, it's not like baking a cake.
No, it's definitely not. We're shitting on bakers today.
There's one in the chat too. That's part where I was poking.
So we're getting pretty close to baking. Everybody knows that you want your mushrooms to be kind of. Mine's actually a thicker sauce than I wanted, but we're not going to come back from that in the time that we have available. But what I wanted to address was the cutting and plating of the chicken. What we're doing here is we're going to cut, and again, keeping in the theme of the evening, we're going to cut on the bias. So it's just a diagonal cut. It's a nice slow cut through the breast. And it allows lovely little pockets that your sauce can go down into. You can cut it any way you want. This is America, but this is the way we're doing it. And then I'm going to do a bed on a bed. So I started with some quinoa. Again, this is everybody can cook quinoa. It's not important. What I like to do with my quinoa, since it's a flavorless kind of flavor convection or conveyance medium, I like to cook it with bouillon. So depending on what you're doing, today we're doing chicken. I did mine with chicken bouillon. Vegetable bouillon gives you a nice subtle neutral flavor, depending on what you're cooking. And then we're going to plate these vegetables up here. Got some lovely spring color going on there. Make sure you can see my plating. Oh, we've got the living room. Okay. That'll do. It's a good thing we don't do this for money, huh?
It's an amateur show. It's all it's ever going to be.
I really appreciate this. It's a fun show.
Yeah, no, that's what I like with most of the chefs is most of them are usually a little nervous getting into it. And then once we do it, they're like, oh, that was a lot of fun. I'm like, yeah, like once you get into it, like we're just smoking and joking and cooking food. And if you can follow the chat, like it's a bunch of just, ridiculous shenanigans. All right, well, I'm plated. I am ready to go.
Okay.
And I am.
So we are going to, like I said, I'm doing a bed on a bed of quinoa here.
Oh, yours is so much prettier than mine.
Sorry?
Yours is so much prettier than mine.
Oh, let's get a look at yours.
Well, when we do the final shot. So the final shot we do is you hold it up and we will do a screenshot.
Roger.
So, tell me which one you're going to be in because I'm going to kick out the other one so we can emphasize it.
Well, I'm not done plating it.
Okay.
So we got to take our mushroom sauce we worked so hard on. And we're just going to, just like that, right over the breast. And then you can get a little juice right in there. Pour that over. Look at that beauty. And why I add quinoa is just because it's so nutritiously complete. It's just a very good staple to add to any meal. Lower on the glycemic index than rice. Holds up in the fridge very well.
And we're glad that you told us all of that in the recipe in advance.
Listen, the instructions said just send me the ingredients.
No, that's not what the instructions said. Go read the speaker notes.
All right, we'll handle this offline.
When I emailed you multiple times was, dude, where's your recipe? Hey, this is a week out. Where's your recipe? It's 3 days out. Where's your recipe?
I didn't get any of those, man.
Yeah, it was. It's in your calendar.
I promise you I didn't get any of those.
Oh, all right. Well, I did send them. All right. So I'm going to be that one. All right. I'm kicking out the other one. Boom. We're big time. Get our screenshot ready.
I guess I need to put my self-view here. There we go.
Ready? Smile. I got it. Good enough. I couldn't hold it any longer. All right. Well, I have to admit, this came out a lot better and fancier than I was expecting. Whenever I see chicken breast, I get nervous with this crowd because there are a lot of people who do chicken breast and don't know how to do it right. So this was awesome. There's a lot of different ways to do this dish. Ted, Charities again.
So DC Central Kitchen, they do so many things for the kids, for the homeless, for the community. Check them out if you want to. If you live in DC and you want to volunteer, that's what you should do. I'm looking at the wrong camera. And then World Central Kitchen. For
those of you at home, hashtag Unicorn Chef when you post anything, and then we're gonna have a makeup episode tomorrow night on Thursday. That recipe is also already posted. We're going to be making a shrimp gumbo. So look forward to seeing everybody again in the future. Ted, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a blast.